So there will be like an action which is baked in. Oh my god, what is this kind of cheering, sir? What is wrong? Oh god. Om Namah Shivaya. Good evening, welcome back to In the Khud. This is August 1st, 2023, 7:16, and I'm extremely tired. I'm extremely exhausted. It's one of those days where you spend the entire day inside geometry nodes. Mental fatigue that sets in. So I'm just gonna walk you through two important things in this video. If I go into my rendered view, look at that. There are a lot of additional things here which were added for a particular reason. But let's just hide them. So look at that. There are low poly vehicles moving on the road here and there, and there were absolutely no keyframes used in driving this animation, which is very interesting. Is happening all through a geometry node structure, and I'm going to show you how that works. It's very important to document that. And secondly, if you were to zoom in here, would you know that there are people, crowds, walking around in our scene? So rendered view is taking a bit of a toll because the scene is a bit huge and we're doing it in cycles. So if you just watch in the solid view, look at that, all these people just walking. And again, no keyframes, nothing at all. It's just all procedural materials. And towards the end of the day, I was trying to figure the ground underneath, and I was trying to add some realistic textures, but before that I got super tired, so I stopped. Now for the majority of the day, it was spent trying to figure how we can have the vehicles move the way they are moving, and it took quite a bit of trial and error. Let me get to showing how that works. You see this thing here, initially what I was trying to do is there are actually two curves here. One curve is in this way, oriented this way, and one is this way. So initially what I was trying to do, if you see there are a lot of muted nodes here, there are a lot of nodes disconnected here, because I wanted to maybe show a bit of the process. So initially what I was trying to do is, of course, the instance on points and then collections going on this. Again, this collection of vehicles is something that I took from Sketchfab. You can download it for free. All vehicles moving, this one. If I say select objects and go into its local view, what I have done is I have added a null here, and that null, the X rotation of that null is having a driver. So hashtag frame divided by something. Here, hashtag frame divided by 5. And what I have done then is all these wheels, they came separately, right? And for all the vehicles, and for all these wheels, what I did is I simply came in here and added a constraint, which is copy rotation constraint, and we're referring to this vehicle tire rotation. And then I did that for all, and then in the end what I did is to the vehicle itself, I parented the wheels. So that's one object. And the last step was to put all of these into single collections, because otherwise if the wheels are separate and your vehicle body is separate, what will end up happening is when you instance them, some will be vehicles, some will be tires of vehicles, which you obviously don't want. So you want to add them into individual, you want to have them as individual collections like this. Now we can come outside the local view and try analyzing one of these. Okay, so you can stay in the rendered view. So that's how that is set up. All of them are in Alt G, so the location is cleared for all of the vehicles. They put into collections that way. And the first try that I was trying to do is, of course, there is this curve that I've used. If I go into the edit mode, you see actually it is just a curve. It's a simple curve with is it a curve or a mesh? Because we've used resample curve, it has to be a curve, otherwise it would say unsupported geometry mesh. So this is a curve with a few points here, and you can come in here and maybe increase this out. Sorry, G, we're going to stick to Y or X, and then that will space them in or out, however. So it's just a curve, and to that curve we've done a resample curve so that we can dynamically change how many points there are, so we don't have to like manually go in and do things. Okay, the initial try that I was trying to do, I'm gonna go through that, was using the sample curve node, because that's something the procedural crowds, by the way, crowds, I did not go about telling what this is, but this crowds thing is coming from an add-on called Procedural Crowd, and I'll get to that. So this is doing exactly what I wanted to do. I thought maybe I can just use this, and instead of, because this also beautifully uses the geometry nodes modifier, so I thought maybe I could come in here and the walk collection, I could replace it with the vehicles. But turns out that was not quite working, and I wasn't able to fix some distance issues and stuff. So it's good only that I tried to work on this vehicle situation all by myself, because you end up learning a lot of things that way. So what I did is I put it through a sample curve, which is what they were using. As that sample curve, you have a factor, and to the factor I added a fraction of multiplication and a random value from seconds, and I was kind of looping it. And what was actually happening is we were actually affecting the position of the vertices or the instances on the real instances. And the way it currently works right now is using Arundel's method, where we aren't actually moving these instances, we just faking that movement, and I'll get to that towards the end, which is what is currently working. So initially I spent a lot of time trying to just do set position and actually move these instances along the curves. But again, even though I had kind of figured that movement out, what was happening is you keep looking at it for a while, which is of course not going to be the case in the render, because the render is starting here in the top view and then it goes up. But if you keep looking at the vehicles for like a few seconds, you will see that it's the same thing which is repeating over and over again with this set position method, right? So that was that kind of consistency which was a problem. What is this huge circle out here? Camera path. Okay, that was some first initial ones. So that was that, and then I was like, okay, there is this divider in between which I just shut, by the way, a few moments back, and I did not want to have the cars coming on that, and there was not proper control in it. So I was trying to use geometry proximity, and on the mesh, divider mesh, I was trying to distribute points, basically a lot of trial and error. Then instead of geometry proximity, I thought maybe I can just use the divider's location and subtract it and add it, and then just check its Y position and delete geometry over there. But turns out none of that is needed. So I'm gonna obviously give reference. This is the most beautiful I wouldn't say most beautiful, because most of the work that Arundel has done on his YouTube channel is kind of beautiful. But Arundel, if you're not aware, is the master of geometry nodes, and actually node-based procedural workflows. Even he has some great videos on shaders. So if you aren't following Arundel, please do. And in this video, he shows exactly how you can do this whole setup. And the only thing that I was missing out of the equation, this is fine. What is happening is instance on points. Okay, this is the object instance, and we're aligning Euler to vector. So you see your initial collection, all the vehicles are pointing in this direction, but I want them to point in the direction of the path on which we are instancing. So you select Euler to vector. If I was to mute this, you will see that they will come back to their original this. But if I unmute this, I've just put this pivot to Y and done -1 0 1. How do I know this is what has to happen? I just experimented. This is something got to do with dot product or cross product, I'm not very sure, but this is the orientation that works. Just check with 0 1 -1 for all three, and you'll get the one that works for you. So that is that, like basic things here. The important thing which is happening is we're saying selection. So we're not using all the points, we are taking a selection. Now all the points, as in how many points are we looking at? If you look at a resample curve, we're looking at 65 points, but obviously there aren't 65 vehicles on show here. If I was to remove this selection, for instance, you see that it will get crowded like this, because every single vertex will have your collection instanced. But instead we're taking a selection through a field. And what are we doing for the field? We're basically saying that look at the index, okay, index for every single instance. So how many instances do we have in vehicles? Let's say there are like 15 or around 12. So all of those instances here, you see currently 0 1 2 3 4 5 is visible, but if I keep playing it, 0 1 2 3 4 5, okay, this index will stay 0 1 2 3 4 5 only, but this will keep changing. So monster truck will not be the case. Yeah, you see a monster truck got shifted and muscle has come up as an SUV. Taxi, again, we're not actually changing the position, we just, it's like an on off switch. All of the thing is there, the 665 vertices that I showed, it's right here. But what we're doing is over a period of time, which is frames multiplied by 0.4, to make it a little slower or faster, you can adjust this to make it to adjust your speed. What we're doing is we're showing things on and off in such a way that it feels like there is movement happening. And the most important thing here is, if you were not to add this to your instance index. Like if I was to play this now, you will see that you're gonna get this kind of jittery thing, which nowadays it's very acceptable because of stable diffusion. It's just like, oh, this is so fancy AI video, but we don't want that nonsense. So you want to take your value, which is subtracting basically the value that's coming from index and scene time. I'm subtracting it here because I wanted to go it in this direction, and you want to plug it into your instance index. That will solve the jittery problem, and it will actually be like this movement is actually happening. And that is pretty much it. Now what we've done here is we've taken modulo after this subtract, and what does modulo do is like it is saying every 10th vertex, because we're saying modulo equal to 0. So modulo is basically a thing where you can loop things. So when modulo equal to 0 and this value is 10, that means we're skipping every 10 vertices in between. If hypothetically, if I go on reducing it, we're skipping less and less vertices in between. So of course, if it's a highway situation, cars aren't going to be very close to each other. There's going to be distance between them. And for this one, I've just duplicated the geometry nodes modifier, flipped it around so that it works that way. And that I thought was the easiest way to do it, instead of trying to do geometry proximity and everything in one. There is, from what I've learned in this project, there is a very big, there's a point where you have to make a decision of, is proceduralism really needed at this point? Because turns out that for what you want to do, there are like much easier manual ways to do it. So you don't have to go to the extreme of, I want everything to be in nodes and procedurally, because honestly it gets on my mind like crazy, trying to figure these things throughout the day. That was one thing. Second thing, quickly, we already hit 12 minutes. Like quickly jumping into the procedural crowds thing. What I'm going to do is come in here, shift A, curve path. Okay, go into the edit mode. There are only, I think there are 4 vertices by default. And I'm going to go into the solo for this. I'm going to bring this here. So in your end panel, you're going to have procedural crowds over here once you install the add-on. Download it. I got it for $18, which is cheap for the amount of functionality this add-on is giving, which is amazing. So procedural crowds, there are a bunch of presets here. You can choose audience, circle, follow curve. Follow curve is what I chose. March, on vertices, random walk, and stadium. I'm yet to experiment with all of these, but what I'm going to show you here is follow curve. So I'm going to add follow curve to this, and what that does is, if you come in here, it will have added, you have to come in here and say add crowd, and then it will add a GEO nodes modifier, like exactly like we want. And if you were to play it, well, that's people walking. Now there are a lot of things that you can do. Firstly, you can come in here into the edit mode and select vertices and move them out, and that will actually space these crowds out. People, if you come in and extrude it out, it should technically increase the number of people. But that's the first thing. You can like modularly control whatever you want to do. And yeah, what is up, madam? Why are you so sad? So that's one thing. I'll just quickly go through these. Switch direction 0.5, as in half of them are going in one direction, half of them in the other. If we make this 1, all of them will go in one direction. If we make this 0, all of them are going in that direction. So this is basically some randomness, because in the natural world everything is a little bit random. Direction seed there are a lot of just seeds when you come to procedural stuff to randomize thing. Lateral space is like how much space there is in between them. So that's probably something you could use. Width is again how far apart they are. People seed, people count. This is one thing you'll probably use a lot, is like reduce the number of people walking around. Then point of interest, I've not yet experimented much, but ideally if you put a null or an empty or somewhere and select that, then it will follow that. So that was that. And let me see, add vertices as well. I'm going to come in here as a shift A, mesh, single vert. Now this is important, that for add vertices, on vertices to happen, you have to have a mesh. And here we chose a path. Here you need to have a mesh. So I'm going to come and add crowd, and it should technically just follow curve, object, curve type objects. This has to be a curve. Okay, we had to do on vertices. Okay, add crowd, that will add just one person. Now you can go into the edit mode and one more person. That's nice. And then I do EY, one more person. EY. oh sorry, X. So we got 4 people here for your 4 vertices, and again you have a few things like focus point. Yeah, you can say idle cheering or stadium. I can do cheering, so there'll be like an action which is baked in. Oh my god, what is this kind of cheering, sir? What is wrong? Oh my, oh god, this is some next level cheering happening here. Yeah, same with this guy. Wow. The thing with like geometry nodes things is you can't actually select one thing and then zoom into them, because it's actually a bigger thing than that. And you can go to 2 as well, so that becomes stadium, where there'll be like sitting, if you have like a bunch of sitting movements and stuff happening. Again, things like these here. I forgot to show one thing here, is that they're walking. You can even make them run. So again, there is so much functionality packed into this add-on. I kind of really like it. You can toggle walk, run, and now they're all running. And just being able to do this, especially for crowds where they're just one thing I really want to take out of the collection. And amazing thing is that I understand how geometry nodes works. So if I just go into this collection here and just remove this guy who's having his hands behind and running for some reason from the running collection, that's doable if I want to do it. So yeah, it's just weird, like who runs like this? Why are these people having their hands behind and running? Like, are they like handcuffed or something? Anyway, so that was a very brief, not so precise kind of overview of the add-on, and those are the 2 things that I wanted to cover in this video. For the boss fight, I actually searched on YouTube boss fight references, and I came across a video which would like gameplay stuff, and Shadow of the Colossus, that is one good game where I can take a reference for how the boss fight villain should be. But all in all, I really haven't done any referencing here. I think with the amount of work that happens in the day, it's best that I spend the entirety of the weekend on the challenge, and we'll see how things go. No stress as of now, and no progress either as of now, but here there is some progress, and that was worth documenting. So thanks so much for being in the khud. We'll catch you tomorrow. Peace.